Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Here are tonight's headlines. 3 white men convicted of murdering African-American jogger Ahmaud Arbery after chasing him in their pickup truck are sentenced to life in prison in a case that highlighted U.S. tensions over racial justice.
It's been a hard fight.
COVID-19 cases in the Philippines rose to 2,936,875 after the DOH reported 26,458 additional cases. Sidney Poitier, Hollywood's first major black movie star and the first black man to win the Best Actor Oscar, dies at 94, prompting an outpouring of grief from the entertainment industry and beyond. And a race car with nobody at the wheel snakes around another to snatch the lead on an oval track at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in an unprecedented high-speed match between self-driving vehicles. First in our news, the total number of COVID-19 registered worldwide since the start of the pandemic topped 300 million on Friday, according to an AFP count based on official figures. And here is an official figure from the Johns Hopkins University. The figure stood at 303,000 now, 303,234,107, with including all the cases announced since the World Health Organization office in China first reported the outbreak of the disease in late December 2019. Case numbers have been on the rise since late last year due to the fast-spreading Omicron variant first identified in Botswana and South Africa. And as Omicron brings the fourth wave of the coronavirus pandemic, many countries are reporting record numbers of infections. Over 13.5 million virus cases have been detected worldwide in the past week, a massive rise of 64% over the previous 7 days, averaging out at 1,938,395 new infections per day. Dr. Michael Ryan, WHO Executive Director for Health Emergencies, said that with billions of people still unvaccinated worldwide, plenty of opportunities remain for the COVID virus to spread and generate new variants. Officials said Omicron is unlikely to be the last COVID variant. Take a look.
I think it's wishful thinking, quite frankly. At this point, we saw with very high levels of the transmission of previous variants and very high levels of seroprevalence how Omicron was able to come in and exploit the immunity gaps that existed, that do exist around the world. So I think there still is a lot of energy in this virus. As Bruce alluded to, there's still billions of people, as the DG alluded to, who are unvaccinated. So there is still plenty, unfortunately, opportunity for this virus to spread and to generate new variants. We hope that doesn't happen. But at the moment, we're not doing enough to prevent that happening in terms of protecting people and in terms of distributing vaccine in a way that would assist with reducing the emergence of variants. The Delta variant, I remember at the time we had discussions Maria, with various scientists who said this is the fittest, best adapted virus that we've ever seen. We cannot see how this virus could adapt anymore, and yet it did. And we've seen a further variant emerge that is even more transmissible than Delta, which was itself more transmissible than previous variants. So, no, I think it's premature for us to, I think it's not premature for us to hope. We can hope for anything. We should hope for everything. But the reality is we're not doing well enough yet globally to be able to say with any degree of certainty that we can avoid the emergence of new variants.
In some countries, Omicron is replacing Delta. In other countries, Delta is competing quite well with Omicron, and it may take some time to determine, which variant will outcompete each other. So I think, unfortunately, this will not be the last variant you will hear us discuss. It will not be the last variant of concern. There is some very important discussion that's being had right now about how much more fit can the virus become in terms of its transmission and its transmissibility. Omicron is quite interesting because it has so many mutations, and there are a number of factors of why Omicron is so transmissible. It has the mutations that allow the virus to adhere to the cell more easily and infect people more easily. We also have immune evasion, which means people can be reinfected, either from past infection or from vaccination, although it's still happening at a low level. And we do have evidence of replication of Omicron in the upper respiratory tract. So there's a number of factors that are happening. And the question is, what will happen as this virus continues to evolve, and what will those additional mutations mean?
Staying with the WHO, the Omicron COVID variant should not be considered mild, and it is still killing people. That's the stark message from the World Health Organization after the highest weekly number of coronavirus infections yet recorded. In a press conference from Geneva, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus repeated his call for vaccine equity as people who have been vaccinated have the best protection from all forms of the virus. Let's listen in.
Last week, the highest number of COVID-19 cases were reported so far in the pandemic. And we know for certain that this is an underestimate of cases because reported numbers do not reflect the backlog of testing around the holidays, the number of positive self-tests not registered, and burdened surveillance systems that miss cases around the world. While Omicron does appear to be less severe compared to Delta, especially in those vaccinated, it does not mean it should be categorized as mild. Just like previous variants, Omicron is hospitalizing people and it's killing people. In fact, the tsunami of cases is so huge and quick that it is overwhelming health systems around the world. Hospitals are becoming overcrowded and understaffed, which further results in preventable deaths from not only COVID-19, but other diseases and injuries where patients cannot receive timely care. First-generation vaccines may not stop all infections and transmission, but they remain highly effective in reducing hospitalization and death from this virus.
Having the contacts of confirmed cases being put in quarantine or quarantining at home is really critical to prevent the onward spread. Now, we know that that is very difficult to do. We know that that takes effort. People need to be able to not work and be supported in not work, be supported in quarantine to make sure that they can provide for their family, that they have food, et cetera, et cetera. And that is not a small matter.
For every day you reduce the quarantine, a small proportion of people will go on to develop symptoms and potentially affect others. But you could say that's 14 days or 40 days, and you can go into a very long period. So this is a trade-off. The science gives you a range, and that range peaks, I think, at about 5 or 6 days, and then falls off exponentially. So based on a country's need, based on the economy, based on the availability of teachers, health workers, and others, based on the availability of tests, countries have flexibility within that to set the periods of quarantine that meet their goals.
In other news, Australian border agents held tennis superstar Novak Djokovic for 8 hours at the Melbourne airport, mostly incommunicado, before canceling his visa and sending him to a detention center, that according to his lawyers. Djokovic secured a COVID vaccine exemption from Tennis Australia and the Australian government because he had tested positive for the virus in December, which should have qualified him for entry according to his lawyers. The date of the first positive COVID PCR test was recorded on the 16th of December last year, his legal team said in a 32-page submission of a federal court hearing Monday to appeal the visa decision. Djokovic, who touched down in Melbourne on Wednesday, Wednesday night, after a 25-hour trip via Dubai, had asked for a time to rest and consult his lawyers the following morning, according to his lawyers. But after a border official initially agreed, his superiors successfully pressured Djokovic to allow them to take an immediate decision on his visa. Foreigners are still mostly banned from travel to Australia, and those granted entry must be fully vaccinated or have a medical exemption. The tennis star has been held since Thursday morning in a Melbourne detention center, notwithstanding his request to be moved to another facility to train for the Australian Open, they added. Now, if successful, he will be gunning for a 10th Australian Open crown and a record 21st Grand Slam title, a milestone that Spanish great Rafael Nadal is also chasing. Although Djokovic has won a legal reprieve from deportation, it is unclear whether he will play in the January 17 to the 30th tournament. COVID-19 cases in the Philippines rose to 2,936,875 today, after the Department of Health reported 26,458 additional cases. Now, this is an increase from the 21,819 additional cases reported on Friday. According to the DOH, all labs were operational on January 6, while 6 labs didn't submit data to the COVID-19 document repository system. Of the total cases, 102,017 were active. Of the active cases, the DOH said 399 were asymptomatic, 94,007 were mild, 2,842 were moderate, 1,462 were severe, and 302 critical. Recoveries rose to 2,782,723, with the additional 1,656 recoveries. The COVID-19 death toll is now at 52,135, with the additional 265 deaths. The DOH has warned of an exponential increase in COVID cases in the country, with what it said was the continued decreased adherence to minimum public safety protocols and the detection of local Omicron variant cases. The DOH said the Philippines was at a high risk for COVID-19. And on Saturday, Health Secretary Francisco Duque III floated the possibility of allowing Metro Manila to revert to a COVID-19 alert level 4 with restrictions on mobility to help stop the continued transmission of the virus. Metro Manila is so far under a COVID-19 alert level 3. President Duterte on Thursday ordered barangay chairmen to identify those unvaccinated persons in their areas and restrain them from going outside amid the sharp rise of COVID cases in the country. Take a look.
So, in the absence of a law, yung presidente is called upon to act. And because it is a national emergency, it is my position that we can restrain. And that I have ordered the barangay captains, because under the law, ang barangay captain can enforce all the laws of the land within his community. I'm now giving orders to the barangay captain to look for those persons who are not vaccinated and just would request them or order them, if you may, to stay put. And if he refuses, he goes out of the house and goes around in the community or maybe wherever magpunta, he can be restrained. And if he refuses, then the barangay captain, being a person of authority, is empowered now to arrest the recalcitrant persons. That is in addition to the police power, the agents of a person in authority. Yun ang ano. And a person in authority, the barangay captain, can also mobilize civilians and adopt them as give them the task officially, probably written, and that converts their status from being a civilian but also a person in authority called upon to assist the persons in authority. They now become agents of a person in authority. That is my position. Bahala ng, well, they can file cases. I'd be happy to answer.
Today, the country reached a grim milestone as the daily COVID cases reached the 20,000 mark after 21,890 new cases were announced by the Department of Health. President Duterte on Thursday night renewed his call to the Philippine National Police to arrest and imprison black market sellers of essential medicines amid the sudden surge in COVID cases. Again, let's listen in.
Yung black market, at this time, lalo na may naghihirap. Yung nahuli, I would insist for the police to arrest them and detain them for investigation. Hulihin talaga ninyo at ipasok ninyo sa selda. Sabi ko, no exception. Hulihin ninyo ang may-ari, kung ang sales girl lang, then arrest the owner. No exception. And I think that is a serious offense, black marketing. At this time, if you do that, talagang upakan ko kayo.
The Food and Drug Administration, or FDA officer in charge, Dr. Oscar Gutierrez, urged the public to purchase medicines only from FDA-licensed drug outlets. Under Republic Act number 9711, or the FDA Act of 2009, the manufacture, importation, exportation, sale, offering for sale, distribution, transfer, non-consumer use, promotion, advertising, or sponsorship of health products without proper authorization is prohibited. Staying in the country, the Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez said supplies of paracetamol and other flu medicines at drugstores will start to normalize this weekend. Speaking to President Duterte during the talk to the people on Thursday evening, Lopez said manufacturers of these medicines have started to deliver drugstores since Wednesday. Let's listen in.
Hindi ibig sabihin ay may shortage po tayo kasi pag sinabing may shortage, buong bansa kulang ang gamot. So hindi po ganoon ang situation. Nag-stock out lang, out of stock, doon sa mga tindahan na yon. Ibig sabihin po nito, kailangan mag-reorder kaagad yung mga branches, yung mga drugstores na yon, mag-reorder kaagad sa mga manufacturers. At ang balita sa atin, ang report sa atin, they ordered 3 times more, the usual ordering level po nila. Dahil nga in anticipation of larger demand, especially ito nga, part of their preparation din sa mga pagtaas ng kaso from the Omicron. So yung nagsimulang problema ng Lunes, na-action na ho as of Wednesday, kahapon, nag-umpisa na. At tuloy-tuloy na ho ito hanggang makahapon, mag-normalize yung stock level natin hanggang maybe in-expect ko natin and now until the weekend, mag-fill up, mano-normalize na yung supply. At inassure natin public, may supply, wag ko silang mag-panic buying na yung iba magpa-panic buying, bibili kahon-kahon. Ang bilin lang nila, yung kailanganin lang nila para kasi hindi rin abutan ng expiration pag masyadong marami silang bibilin.
A local pharmaceutical company is also eyeing the manufacture of molnupiravir, an oral medicine said to reduce severe symptoms of COVID-19. That according to Department of Trade and Industry Secretary Ramon Lopez. During President Duterte's talk to the people also on Thursday night, Lopez said if it pushes through, the drug will be more accessible and affordable to Filipinos.
We also appreciate yung nireport ng FDA kanina, especially yung isang local manufacturer na kinukumbinsi namin locally produced nung iba pang gamot tulad nung ni-report kaninang molnupiravir. We are hoping na mapadali, mabigyan ng green lane para pag local production to, mapapamura. Kasi ang lalabas siya parang generics. So that itong mga gamot na antivirus, those that will kill the virus, will be accessible sa ating kababayan at a lower price compared sa mga imported.
The Food and Drug Administration has approved the emergency use authorization for molnupiravir and injectable antiviral drug Ronapreve. FDA Director General Oscar Gutierrez said Lloyd Laboratories applied for certificate product registration for locally manufactured molnupiravir on December 22 last year. The said drug is given only to patients who have tested positive for COVID and with mild and moderate symptoms. It should not be taken for prophylactic reasons. Aside from Ronapreve and molnupiravir, the government eyes to bring in another antiviral medicine called Paxlovid. To Canada now, where Ontario has updated its restrictions after a surge of cases due to the highly transmissible variant of Omicron. Here's Ashley Sakmar from our EBC Toronto, Canada Bureau.
This past Wednesday, January 5th, Ontario, Canada returned back to Step 2 of reopening, a long-term plan that the province had set in 2021 to slowly transition back to normal. However, after the recent extreme rise in COVID-19 cases within the province, Ontario is once again reducing the limit capacity and closing indoor access to many public places. Most of Ontario's public space limit is currently at 50% capacity, with no indoor access to places such as restaurants, cinemas, museums, gyms, and the like. All public and private schools will move to online learning, awaiting further updates from the province's Ministry of Education. Since July 16, 2021, Ontario was in Stage 3 of the plan to reopen. In October last year, officials had released the full plan, with a projected vision of lifting all limits by March 2022. However, the plan to exit Stage 3 of reopening came to a halt in November, which continued on throughout December after the arrival of the Omicron variant in Ontario and the extreme rise in cases during the winter months. Evolving data shows that the Omicron variant may be less severe than prior strains. However, with 30 mutations in its spike protein, it is proving to be a highly transmissible variant even amongst those who are fully vaccinated. The rise of cases escalated quickly during this past holiday season, and as of Monday this week, the total number of active cases in Ontario is 130,307, with Omicron being the most frequent variant in the province. In Toronto, Ashley Sakmar, Eagle News, we live in interesting times.
Staying in Canada, a curfew, a ban on private gatherings, and a delayed return to school greets Quebecers as the new year begins. As Eagle News correspondent Andre Lajoie tells us, the province put these measures in effect to protect a hospital network that is near the breaking point because of the Omicron variant. Andre.
In the latest restriction came into effect New Year's Eve in the province of Quebec, a nightly curfew is in effect from 10 p.m. until 5 a.m. Travel will be only permitted in healthcare humanitarian visas or were considered a priority. Violators face fines in between $1,000 and $6,000. Private gatherings are limited to just one household, although a single person can join a family bubble. Classrooms in the province will remain closed until at least January 17. Quebecers woke up on New Year's Day to news that more than 17,000 new cases of COVID have been reported. That's the highest number since the beginning of the pandemic almost 2 years ago. Quebec Premier François Legault is hoping his latest measures will slow the spread of the virus. Faced with more COVID patients in hospital in the coming weeks, Legault is pleading with healthcare workers who have left the profession to return. And that help is going to be needed. More than 250 people were admitted to hospitals, bringing the hospitalization to 1,161. Public health officials fear hospitalizations could range between 1,600 and 2,100 in as little as 3 weeks, a level that will cripple the healthcare system. Legault warns that many cases could result in a situation where the system would no longer be able to treat everyone in the province. I am Andre Lajoie, Eagle News International in Montreal, Canada.
Thank you, Andre. To the U.S. now, where the Supreme Court heard lengthy arguments challenging the Biden administration's vaccine and testing requirements in the workplace. After months of public appeals to Americans to get vaccinated against COVID-19, which has killed more than 830,000 people in the U.S., President Biden announced in September that he was making vaccinations compulsory at companies that employ 100 workers or more.
I am a grocery guy. I'm not the vaccine police. It is not my position. It's not the government's right to put me in the position of the everyday medical decisions of my employees. And they should not be put in a position to have a vaccine or potentially lose their job where they cannot take care of the well-being of their families. That is blatantly illegal and unconstitutional, and I will not stand up for it.
For me, and for many Americans out there, this is about individual liberty, and this is about the breadth of the federal government's reach into your lives. Whether or not the federal government can mandate medical procedures such as a vaccine on you. The pandemic, and we heard, well, this is unprecedented. I would remind you, it's not unprecedented. This country has dealt with pandemics before. In fact, we have fought both pandemics and world wars simultaneously, and yet have not had this type of divisiveness.
Scott Keller, a former Texas Solicitor General representing the business groups, also said the rule requiring COVID vaccinations at companies that employ 100 people or more would lead many workers to quit. Ohio Solicitor General Benjamin Flowers also argued against the OSHA rule, or OSHA rule, saying it was not truly intended to regulate a workplace danger. Chief Justice John Roberts acknowledged there was a pressing urgency to addressing the problem of the pandemic, but joined other conservative justices in questioning whether it should be the federal authorities that respond with mandates. The Supreme Court is expected to rule shortly, possibly within days. Businesses with 100 employees or more represent about 2/3 of the private sector workforce in the U.S., or some 80 million people. The healthcare worker mandate would apply to roughly 10 million people. The Supreme Court has 6 conservative justices and 3 liberal justices, and all of them have been vaccinated and received booster shots. If the court blocks the vaccination mandates, it would be a major blow to President Biden, who has made bringing the pandemic under control one of his priorities, but is battling a surge in cases from the Omicron variant. In other news, Sidney Poitier, Hollywood's first major black movie star and the first black man to win the Best Actor Oscar, has died at 94, prompting an outpouring of grief from the entertainment industry and beyond. Stars including Denzel Washington, along with current and past U.S. presidents Joe Biden and Barack Obama, led emotional tributes as news broke Friday of the death of the celebrated thespian. Poitier died at his home in Los Angeles late Thursday, according to Davis Director of Communications Latre Raming. The spokesman did not immediately respond to questions about the cause of death. At a time of racial tension in America in the 1950s and 60s, Poitier balanced success with a sense of duty to choose projects that tackled bigotry and stereotypes, including his 1967 classics, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and In the Heat of the Night. President Biden called him a once-in-a-generation actor, an advocate whose work carried so much dignity, power, and grace that it changed the world on and off the big screen. Poitier was awarded an honorary Oscar in 2002 for his extraordinary performances on the silver screen and his dignity, style, and intelligence off of it. On television, he portrayed icons of history, such as South Africa's first black president, Nelson Mandela, and the first black justice on the U.S. Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall. And in 1997, he took up a ceremonial post as Bahamian ambassador to Japan. He was awarded the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, the country's highest civilian civilian honor by Obama in 2009. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. 3 white men convicted of chasing and murdering Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia were sentenced to life in prison Friday in a case that highlighted U.S. tensions over racial justice. Travis McMichael, 35, and his father, Gregory McMichael, 66, were sentenced to life without parole. Take a look.
Verdict is as follows. In the Superior Court of Glenn County, State of Georgia, the State of Georgia versus Travis McMichael, case number CR 000433. Jury verdict form. Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find Travis McMichael guilty. Count 2, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant Travis McMichael guilty. Count 3, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant Travis McMichael guilty. Count 4, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant Travis McMichael guilty. Count 5, felony murder. We, the jury, find the defendant Travis McMichael guilty.
Now, their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan, 52, who had a less direct role in the murder and cooperated with investigators.
To tell you the truth, I never saw this day back in 2020. I never thought this day would come.
For real, all life matters. Yes. Not just black children. We don't want to see nobody go through this. Amen. I wouldn't want to see no daddy watch their kid get lynched and shot down like that. That's right, Mom. So it's all our problem. It's all our problem. So, hey, let's keep fighting. Amen.
Cell phone video taken by Bryan showed the armed men following Arbery in their trucks for about 5 minutes, suspecting with no evidence that he might have been a burglar. Arbery repeatedly tried to avoid them but was blocked by the trucks and then shot and killed by Travis McMichael. The men claimed they were trying to make a citizen's arrest, which was legal in Georgia at that time. But a mostly white jury rejected that argument. Prosecutor Linda Dunikoski called their actions vigilantism. or vigilantism. The investigation into the original incident was stalled by local law enforcement for 3 months until the video was leaked, sparking national outrage. A local prosecutor, Jackie Johnson, has been indicted for violating her oath of office and allegedly hindering the investigation into Arbery's death. The sentencing does not end the case, however. Besides the possibility of appealing the Georgia state case, the three men are also facing several federal charges of civil rights violations in their pursuit and murder of Arbery.
Count 6.
In other news, the United Nations Children's Fund, or UNICEF, lauded the Philippines' passing of a law criminalizing child marriage, noting its importance as another layer of protection for children. In a statement, UNICEF Philippines representative Oyun Saikan Dendev Norov said the passage of Republic Act 11596, or the Prohibition of Child Marriage Law, strengthens the country's legal framework and protection of Filipino children. Child marriage, she said, is a human rights violation that can result in a lifetime of suffering, both for young girls and their children. Compared to women in their 20s, she said young girls are more likely to die due to complications in pregnancy and childbirth. The Prohibition of Child Marriage Law was signed by President Duterte on December 10 last year and was released to the media on Thursday. The law defines child marriage as any marriage where one or both parties are children and solemnized in civil or church proceedings or any recognized traditional, cultural, or customary manner. It includes the informal union or cohabitation outside of wedlock between an adult and a child or between children. Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev dismissed calls for talks with protesters as nonsense after days of unprecedented unrest. He vowed to destroy armed bandits and authorized his forces to shoot to kill without warning in his third televised address to the nation this week. Take a look.
Но террористы по-прежнему наносят ущерб государственному и частному имуществу, применяет оружие в отношении граждан. Правоохранительным органам и армии мною дан приказ открывать огонь на поражение без предупреждения. За рубежом высказываются призывы к сторонам провести переговоры для мирного решения проблем. Какая глупость! Какие могут быть переговоры с преступниками, с убийцами?
The initial cause of the protest was a spike in prices for compressed gas in the country's western energy heartland, but a government move to lower the prices failed to stop demonstrations continuing. The violence erupted late Tuesday when police fired tear gas and stun grenades at a 1,000-strong protest in Almaty. And then the next day, protesters stormed government buildings, including the city administration headquarters and presidential residence, setting them ablaze, and a nationwide state of emergency was declared. The Interior Ministry said 26 armed criminals had been killed in the unrest. It said 18 security officers had been killed and more than 740 wounded, more than 3,800 people detained. On Wednesday, Tokayev appealed for help from the Russia-dominated Collective Security Treaty Organization. Russia's defense ministry said Friday 9 planes carrying paratroopers and hardware had landed in Almaty, and Russian forces had helped to secure the airport. The president thanked the leaders of Russia, China, and Turkey for their support, with special thanks to Russian President Vladimir Putin for sending troops as part of a Moscow-led force to help quell the unrest.
Какая глупость! Какие могут быть переговоры?
Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken warned that Kazakhstan will find it difficult to lower Russian influence after inviting in troops to quell the unrest. Take a look.
There are very particular drivers of what's happening in Kazakhstan right now, as I said, that go to economic and political matters. And what's happening in there is different from what's happening on Ukraine's borders. Having said that, I think one lesson of recent history is that once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave. Thanks.
He also called on foreign troops and Kazakh authorities to adhere to international human rights standards hours after President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev thanked Russia for assistance and issued shoot-to-kill orders. Blinken, who spoke with his counterpart from Kazakhstan on Thursday, renewed his call for respect for peaceful protests, media freedom, and for the end of an internet blackout. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that Russia could choose a diplomatic solution on Ukraine in talks next week, but warned the U.S. would not be distracted by Moscow's demands. Take a look.
Russia's aggressive actions are a threat to peace and security in Europe. We're prepared to respond forcefully to further Russian aggression. But a diplomatic solution is still possible and preferable if Russia chooses it. They want to draw us into a debate about NATO rather than focus on the matter at hand, which is their aggression toward Ukraine. We won't be diverted from that issue because what's happening in Ukraine is not only about Ukraine. It's part of a broader pattern of destabilizing, dangerous, and often illegal behavior by Moscow as it tries to build a sphere of influence that covers the countries that were once under Soviet dominion, and to stop them from realizing their democratic aspirations as fully sovereign, independent nations.
Now, top Russian and U.S. diplomats meet Monday in Geneva after Moscow amassed tens of thousands of troops on the Ukrainian border and urged the West to agree in writing not to expand NATO. Russian President Vladimir Putin denies plans for an invasion of Ukraine, where Moscow in 2014 seized the Crimean Peninsula and has championed an insurgency that has since claimed more than 13,000 lives. Russia asked for the talks after putting forward proposals that include guarantees that NATO will not expand to Ukraine or further parts of the former Soviet Union. Russia contends that it was promised after the Cold War that NATO would not expand eastward. In draft proposals issued by Russia, NATO would agree not to take in former Soviet republics Ukraine and Georgia or to build bases elsewhere in the former Soviet Union. Russia ramped up pressure on Ukraine following the overthrow of a government that resisted calls to move closer to the West. In other news, at least 16 people died when an explosion triggered by a suspected gas leak caused a building to collapse in the Chinese city of Chongqing, according to state media. The blast at 12:10 p.m. local time brought down a neighborhood committee building housing a canteen, trapping 26 people, according to Xinhua news agency. In the early hours of Saturday, Xinhua put the new death toll at 16, with 10 more injured, one of them critically. On Friday, the Chongqing government had put the initial death toll at 9. Videos and photos from Xinhua showed orange-clad workers in hard hats climbing through the rubble on Friday night under floodlights. And Xinhua said it is in its latest update that as of midnight, all those trapped had been pulled out. The injured people are receiving medical treatment, Chongqing authorities said through their verified account on the Twitter-like Weibo platform. The scene of the blast appeared to be in the middle of other buildings and was surrounded by a crowd of bystanders earlier on Friday. An eyewitness told state-run Phoenix TV that the blast was, quote, very scary. Our windows have all been blown to pieces. Xinhua said people were having lunch when the blast occurred. The cause of the blast remains under investigation. A strong earthquake with a magnitude of 6.6 struck China's remote northwestern Qinghai province early Saturday, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. Take a look. The epicenter of the quake, which struck at about 1:45 a.m. local time at a shallow depth of 10 kilometers or 6 miles, was located about 140 kilometers north-northwest of the city of Sidney, according to U.S. seismologists. A 5.1 magnitude aftershock followed about 25 minutes later, the USGS said. The China Earthquake Network Center put the magnitude at 6.9, according to the state news agency Xinhua. The U.S. agency warned that the population in this region resides in structures that are highly vulnerable to earthquake shaking, though some resistant structures exist. The sparsely populated province is spread across the Tibetan Plateau. In 2010, a 6.9 magnitude quake in Qinghai left 3,000 people dead or missing. And at least 21 people died in an enormous traffic jam caused by tens of thousands of visitors thronging a Pakistani hill town to see unusually heavy snowfall, according to authorities today. Now, police reported that at least 6 people had frozen to death in their cars, while it was not immediately clear if others had died from asphyxiation after inhaling fumes in the snow drift. Interior Minister Sheikh Rashid said the military had mobilized to clear roads and rescue thousands still trapped near Murray, around 70 kilometers northeast of the capital, Islamabad. Rescue 1122, Pakistan's emergency service, released a list naming 21 people it said had been confirmed dead. It included a policeman, his wife, and their 6 children. Hassan Kawar, a spokesman for the Punjab government, said they had frozen to death inside a trapped car. The town of around 30,000 clings to the side of steep hills and valleys and is serviced by narrow roads that are frequently clogged, even in good weather. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. The World Bank has approved $90 million in additional financing for Iran to help fight against the COVID-19 pandemic, according to a spokesperson on Friday. The Washington-based Development Lenders Board of Directors approved the aid on December 21, according to World Bank spokesperson, which will be utilized only for procuring additional life-saving essential medical equipment to strengthen Iran's pandemic response. The World Bank had in May 2020 extended Tehran $50 million via the Iran COVID-19 Emergency Response Project, which the spokesperson said was carried out on an exceptional basis due to the pandemic. The spokesperson called Iran the epicenter of COVID-19 infections in the region and said quelling the virus there would benefit its neighbors, particularly as the Omicron variant threatens to cause a new wave of cases. Here in the country, there will be no longer hard lockdowns amid a spike in cases of COVID-19 made worse by the more transmissible Omicron variant. In a statement on Friday, the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or PCCI, said they were assured by the Department of Trade and Industry officials that the government will not implement massive lockdowns anymore. Instead, restrictions will be focused on the unvaccinated. Newly elected PCCI officials paid a virtual courtesy call on DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez and other trade officials on Thursday. George Barcelon was elected PCCI president anew after his previous term in 2015. During the meeting, Lopez said the high level of vaccination rate and the medical treatment already available have led to easing some protocols for vaccinated instead of implementing a total lockdown. He added that the no vax, no labas or going out policy could be expanded nationwide. In the languishing area around Salton Sea, companies are starting to extract lithium, the increasingly valuable metal whose supply is concentrated in a few global pockets, is vital for the rechargeable batteries expected to cleanly power the cars and homes of our polluted planet's future. Lithium hydroxide is worth over $25,000 per ton, a price that has risen more than 250% over the last year, offering hope of a revival to an area that ranks among California's poorest. Take a look.
The lithium produced from here will go into electric vehicle batteries. And so our lithium product will end up, for the most part, with EVs made in the US, might be some made in Europe.
Work, few more things would really help out.
They told us they're gonna be openings. They're gonna be a lot of jobs for people around here and in the valley, Imperial Valley.
A race car with nobody at the wheel snakes around another to snatch the lead on an oval track at the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in an unprecedented high-speed match between self-driving vehicles. Take a look.
We removed the power for the driver, and we put a lot of electronic inside to be able to drive autonomously. So we have a bunch of cameras, 3 LiDARs to have 360 degrees of coverage of sensing up to 150 meters. We actually indeed named our driver, so we have a virtual driver, which is called Ascari, which was the last Italian Formula 1 championship back to 50 years ago. And now the Ascari name stands for Autonomous Car Intelligence. So
what we can control is just the speed of the car. So we can set a certain speed, and then the car will do everything automatically. So it will pass automatically, it will cut in automatically. So the overtaking maneuver is completely autonomous.
We know that autonomous vehicles can operate pretty well at low speeds, and a lot of industry is focused on low-speed automation, kind of urban and suburban mobility. But the future is going to require autonomous vehicles to encounter each other at very high speeds on highways, maybe 70, 80, or even 100 miles an hour. We're here to advance the technology. We hope maybe that some of the advancements that we have in our competitions will find their way into Formula One or IndyCar and will actually allow those drivers to go faster safely. We'd love to see a future where You know, IndyCar or Formula One is maybe 270 miles an hour, even 300 miles an hour.
Members of Italian-American team Polymove cheered as their Formula One race car nicknamed Minerva repeatedly passed a rival entered by South Korean team Case. Minerva was doing nearly 150 miles per hour or 185 kilometers per hour when it blew past the Case car, easily beating the top speed hoped for by race organizers. But every racer was deemed a winner by organizers, who saw the real victory as the fact that self-driving algorithms could handle the high-speed competition. The race pitted teams of students from around the world against one another to rev up the capabilities of self-driving cars, improving the technology for use anywhere. The single seat usually reserved for a driver was during this race instead packed with electronics. The students programmed the software that pilots the car by quickly analyzing data from sophisticated sensors. And the software piloting the cars has to anticipate how other vehicles on the course will behave, then maneuver accordingly, according to Marcus Lindkamp, a professor at Munich TUM, which won the October competition. And the fitness tech industry boomed during this pandemic, and the market is estimated to be $4.5 billion in the U.S. this year, according to an analyst from the Consumer Electronics Show at the CES, where dozens of sport-at-home companies are flourishing. Take a look.
Pandemic locked us inside, right? We couldn't go outside. We couldn't do the things that we loved, right? But the human body still needs cardiovascular activity. It's quite simple. You just need a really engaging way to get that cardiovascular activity and to release that sort of, you know, the sort of energy that builds up in you because you've been sitting down for so long. You know, a big part of going to the gym together is sort of suffering together. It's like you experience pain, you work really hard, and you sweat, and so do the people around you, and you build a camaraderie around that. And now that we don't share that space, at least in real time, we have to do it virtually, right?
And you start talking to each other. And then all of a sudden, you have a group of maybe 6 guys, you know, from all over the world. A guy's in London, a guy's out in California, a guy's down in Florida, and you have this community, you know.
Fitness tech devices will be a $4.5 billion market in the U.S. this year. And there's a growing group of people who are engaging with these devices in their home. They want connectivity. They want to engage with other people online, and this is helping people, incentivize them to keep fit and to just engage with other people.
Connected rowing machine maker Hydro allows customers to comment and like others' workouts, and users have developed their own social media groups. The machines, which sell for $2,295, have the usual rowing bar and seat, but also a screen that allows clients to exercise along with instructors on the water in locales from Miami to London. Credit Suisse downgraded the firm in December, saying the market shifts have forced Peloton to increase advertising and discounting. However, as cases of COVID's Omicron variant break records around the world, many are again hunkering down at home. And exercise of any kind has offered some people a relief from the pandemic's impacts, as work, school, and travel disruptions and simmering health worries offer plenty to stress about. As always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Challenges may often come our way, but sometimes it takes a good fall to know where we really stand. And this has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert and stay informed because we live in interesting times. Good night.